Today in part 3 we are going to continue with David Icke's elite reptilian theory. We do not know enough of the reptilian race, if they exist, or any other alien race for that matter, to say whether it is possible for the human species to have a hybrid reptilian human child or vice versa. Can it actually occur naturally, or would it require some help like slicing and splicing? And even so, what does science say? Now, even mixing of human DNA can sometimes be quite tricky. So, is it even possible to mix human DNA with some kind of alien DNA? And then, if and when it was done, what will the results be? Now, we humans do have close, and I mean very close, non-human relatives already. And they do not even need a spaceship to get here. Humans share about 98.8% of their DNA with both chimpanzees and bonobos. 98.8% is darn close if you ask me. Now, we also share 98% of our DNA with the gorilla and 97% with the orangutan. The most amazing thing about this is that although there is only 1.2% difference in DNA between man and ape, we are still so very, very different. The reason is that although it sounds so tiny, it actually amounts to millions of individual genetic differences. So one would think that with such a small difference in DNA, it should be possible to create a bonobo or chimp human hybrid. But no, alas, it is not. Or then highly unlikely to biologically impossible, even with modern techniques like IVF. This is because the language of DNA is so complex, and the barrier to having or creating a, say, bonobo human child or a chimp human child does not rely on the amount of DNA we share, but how that DNA is structured and organized. The biggest hurdle or barrier happens at the chromosomal level, which is the structures that pack our DNA. Humans have 46 chromosomes, or then 23 pairs. The chimpanzee and bonobos have 48 chromosomes, or then 24 pairs. Those who believe in evolution may say or tell you that two ape chromosomes fused together to form the human chromosome 2. Now, if that is true or correct, then it is this particular mismatch which makes a human-chimp hybrid impossible. It means in practical terms that should a human sperm and chimp egg, or the other way around, would be brought together in a test tube, the chromosomes will not line up correctly during cell division. And the fertilized egg would almost certainly fail to divide properly and would die in the embryonic stage. There are also, of course, other issues like developmental timing. The human and chimp embryos grow at entirely different rates. For example, human brains and nervous systems take much longer to develop in the womb than in the chimp or the bonobo. The chemical signals telling an embryo thus to grow limbs or a heart or whatever would thus be out of sync. Okay, so If it is almost impossible to create a human-chimp hybrid, how difficult must it be, if not downright impossible, to, through natural means or otherwise, create a human alien or then human reptilian hybrid? So it's not that us, mere mortals, do not believe David Icke. It is that even our limited knowledge of science makes it difficult to believe him. But let's, for a moment, pretend that whatever DNA reptilians have, whether it is 97, 95, or 91% similar to that of a human, is in the right sequence, right pairing, and right packing to line up in the embryonic phase. You will have to have a heck of a lot of imagination. But let's go ahead and pretend it was, it is, and it can be possible, because fact remains, we don't know otherwise, okay? We have no idea what a so-called reptilian's DNA looks like. So we can't say, we don't know. But we can speculate and we can pretend, and that is exactly what we are going to do now. Now we have to move on and try and understand how a child inherits, say, a parent's eye color or hair color. So I'm going to give a quick, simple overview because most people who had children will have some sort of idea. Okay, now let's say DNA is like a recipe book, and the genes are the individual recipes or recipe for each and every trait that we have. Every child receives 2 copies of each recipe, one from the mother and one from the father. So to understand why a child has brown eyes and dark hair or blonde and blue-eyed, the explanation comes down to how these recipes interact to form the child's own recipe book. This interaction is driven by what is called genetic dominance. In genetics, some recipes are stronger, louder, bigger than others, or maybe more expensive, you know. For example, dark hair and dark eyes are indeed dominant. If a child inherits 1 copy of a recipe for dark hair or eyes, it will usually override the other recipe for light hair or eyes. In the same way, blonde or red hair and blue or green eyes are indeed recessive, you know, the quieter, slower, weaker recipes. And therefore a child will need 2 copies, one from each parent. And then with no bully dark gene to bully them back into submission. Of course, it is far more complicated than this, i.e. dad may have brown eyes but carry a blue-eyed gene as well. Mom has blue eyes and thus received 2 blue-eyed genes from her parents. So it is 100% possible for them to have a blue-eyed child because both have a blue-eyed gene. Or one could say that out of the 4 recipes brought to the table, 3 had blue-eye genes. Okay, the majority. I'm not going to take this any further because we are not talking about simple human DNA, and we're actually talking about some unknown DNA. So, you know, we can speculate until the cows come home. So what if, beyond our wildest dreams and imagination, there is such a thing as an alien human or human reptilian hybrid? What would he or she look like? Which would be the dominant gene, the human gene or the reptilian gene? Now it is difficult to say once again, as we don't know anything about alien or reptilian DNA. What is true, though, is that it sometimes happened that a physical trait which was considered bred out or dormant suddenly pops up 2 to 3 generations later, and sometimes even longer. You know, that huge hook nose or that very coarse curly hair which everyone was glad to be rid of suddenly pops up in the youngest member of the family, and Dad knows he will have to start saving for plastic surgery. But, how does that happen? Well, say grandparents, Grandpa A and Grandma B, get together. Grandpa has dead straight hair, which is a dominant gene, and Grandma has coarse curly hair, a recessive gene. Their daughter, who has straight hair, inherited one dominant and one recessive gene. So she is a carrier of this recessive gene. Now she marries the bloke with straight hair whose parents had straight hair. So they have a kid with straight hair. But unbeknown to her, this kid marries a guy who, like her, has straight hair, but he has a curly-haired ancestor. And what happens now? Now they have 2 recessive genes, and their poor Betty pops out with great-grandma's coarse curly hair. So, let's say Queen Victoria's mother, all right, Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, had a hybrid baby. The kid may not have looked like a little reptilian at all, because both Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, both her parents were human. So the reptilian DNA may remain as a recessive gene. And this can continue for who knows how long. For all we know, maybe that is why, until very recently, royalty married royalty, or at least titled elite. In other words, to ensure that that recessive reptilian gene is actually maintained and not bred out. Remember, Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip were third cousins through Queen Victoria, and second cousins once removed through Christian IX of Denmark. Now, or something like that. I was really too lazy to go look up the exact details, but you catch my drift. So far, science tells us it's not likely, but not impossible, okay? Not impossible at all for there to be a reptilian recessive gene, or any other kind of recessive gene for that matter, still lingering in the blood of Harry and William, etc. So, the next result is that we are currently, or as far as we've come today, we are definitely not in any position to dismiss David Icke. Not at all. And we can't unless or until we get hold of that elusive reptilian DNA. Now, in part 4, we'll talk about the science of shape-shifting and metamorphosis in animals and how it could happen, if at all, in humans. Thereafter, we will talk about Tim Cohen's Antichrist theory. So guys and girls, I hope you've enjoyed this series so far. It is completely different, and if in any way real or there's any truth in it, it could also explain a lot of royal mysteries. So until we meet again on the next one, please take good care of yourselves, stay vigilant, and stay safe. Bye.